Hey, what's up guys? It's Mr. Lai here, and today I'm going to be talking about the balance of payments and exchange rates. Okay, so we've already learned that the current account plus the financial and also the capital account adds up to zero. Assuming that the capital account is very small, when there's a current account surplus, the financial account will be in a deficit, and vice versa. Okay, and in this presentation, we're actually going to be learning about the relationship between exchange rates and these accounts, particularly how different exchange rate regimes allow the current account deficits and surpluses to match the surpluses and deficits of the capital and financial account. Let's start with looking at this diagram here. Okay, the original exchange rate for the US dollar is at 0.67 euros per dollar. Okay, we're at point A. Following a higher demand for US goods, okay, by the Europeans, there is now a higher demand for US dollars, okay, and therefore there is a rightward shift in the demand curve from D1 to D2, okay. More US dollars are demanded at each and every price level. Now, in order to understand this, let's just look at what is happening at 0.67 euros per dollar. Okay, first of all, there is an excess demand for dollars of Q2 minus Q1, okay, because now the demand has already increased. At the existing price level of 0.67, there is an excess demand. Secondly, okay, the US has a current account surplus and excess credits at 0.67. What do I mean? Okay, because at 0.67, okay, remember demand curve has already shifted to the right. At 0.67, the existing levels, US exports are now relatively cheaper and imports are relatively more expensive. And therefore, exports are greater than imports, and there's a US trade surplus, okay, and a Eurozone trade deficit. Now, how does this imbalance correct itself? Okay, with a higher demand for US goods leads to more demand for US dollars, correct? Now, this actually puts an output pressure on the currency. Before, I've deliberately not talked about 0.9 because I don't want you to be confused. We've shown the rightward shift in the demand curve from D1 to D2, and we have just examined what's happening at 0.67. But we actually know that when the demand increases, the equilibrium exchange rate increases to 0.9 euros per dollar in this case. And at euro 0.9 per USD, the US exports are now more expensive and imports are more cheaper, okay? And therefore, the imports will now equal to exports, okay? And now the balance of trade rebalances. Let's look at this from the Eurozone perspective. Remember, if you have watched my video on exchange rates, the market for euros here in this scenario is a mirror image of the market for US dollars, okay? Euro 0.67 is basically the same as USD 1.5 per euro, okay? Likewise, euros of 0.9 per dollar is equals to 1.11 US dollar per euro, okay? This is just to show you where I got these numbers from. The increase in the demand for USD, okay? Remember in the previous diagram, you have a rightward shift in the demand curve. When they buy more demand for the US goods, they need to demand more US dollars, is equivalent to the increase in the supply of euros. By demanding more USD, they don't want as much euros, okay? And therefore they are selling that off, okay? And in this case, you can see that S1 has increased to S2. Similar to the previous example, okay? Actually, the same example, but from the US perspective. Here, at USD 1.5 per euro, okay, there is now an excess supply of euros equaling Q2 minus Q1. At 1.5, okay, US imports are now cheaper and Eurozone exports are now more expensive at this price level following this increase in supply. And therefore, imports is greater than exports, and there's a current account deficit in the Eurozone. Now, how does it rebalance? When there's an increase in the supply of euros, okay, there is a depreciation in the exchange rate, okay, from 1.5 to 1.11. And $1.11 dollars per euro, imports are now more expensive and exports are now cheaper. And therefore, at 1.11, the imports equals to exports, okay, and the balance of trade rebalances. And just to sum up, in a floating exchange rate system where there are exchange rate changes, it automatically eliminates current account deficits and surpluses and creates a balance in the balance of payments. Okay, so what happens at fixed and managed floating rate system? Okay, here in this scenario, we're assuming that the currency is fixed at $1.5 per euro. Okay, the Eurozone has a fixed exchange rate with the US dollars. Okay, and it's the same scenario. Okay, the demand for imports, for US imports increases, therefore they're buying more US dollars and they're supplying more euros, okay? And the supply of euros increases from S1 to S2, okay? And therefore creating a current account deficit. Now, as soon as the supply increases, okay, as you can see, it will fall. The equilibrium exchange rate falls from 1.5 to 1.11, okay, dollars per euro. It sends warning bells, okay, to the Eurozone countries, okay, because it's not allowed, because it's supposed to be fixed at 1.5, okay. So what will they do? In order to keep it fixed, the European Central Bank will buy the euros, okay, and they'll keep buying, okay, until the equilibrium exchange rate returns to 1.5. And here you can see the buying action is reflected by the increase in demand, okay. It shifts all the way up to the point E, where the equilibrium of $1.5 per euro is restored. However, the problem of this is that it's not sustainable because it needs a lot of foreign currency reserves to sustain the exchange rate. And suppose that people keep on buying these US imports, basically then it just keeps on needing to buy the euros that is being supplied out into the market. And unless it's got unlimited foreign reserves, which it is not likely, okay, then it won't be sustainable. The exchange rate will fall at some point. So we need to find a way to increase the credits, okay, and decrease the debits, okay. Increase the money that is actually flowing in, okay, demanding more of those euros, okay. And one of the methods is to increase interest rates, okay? As soon as you increase interest rates in the Eurozone countries, people want to put more money into your country, and therefore they will be demanding more euros, okay? And thereby pushing up the demand up from D1 to D2. So here in this case, we're relying on people, external agents or actors to come and support your currency by giving them a more attractive return. And secondly, which is the point which I thought was not very likely, is to limit imports, okay? And here through limit imports through contractionary and monetary policies, okay? So basically, I'm not letting you buy as much of those foreign imports, and therefore you won't be supplying so much of those foreign currencies, those domestic currencies out into the market, okay? Not very likely to happen, I think. Now, in a fixed exchange rate system, okay, the balance of payments is made to balance by policies to keep the exchange rate fixed, okay? And in China, okay, which is actually has a kind of managed exchange rate, a combination of fixed and floating, right? The Chinese government often intervenes, okay, to rebalance the balance of payments, okay? So if it is incurring a current account surplus, okay, which is happy, okay, when the US gives it pressure, it is forced to appreciate the currency. Okay, it appreciates the currency a little bit to make its imports more cheaper and exports more expensive, and therefore reducing the current account surplus. Okay, and when the Chinese government intervenes, this is often known as the Chinese national team, 國家隊, intervening to the market. Okay. Okay, hey guys, okay, here you have it, okay? So in this presentation, one of the most important pointers is you need to understand how the freely floating exchange rate regimes, okay, allows a country with a current account deficit or surplus to rebalance, okay? And also in a fixed exchange rate regime, how a country in the face of a current account surplus or deficit, what are the measures that they need to undertake in order to achieve the fixed exchange rates. Okay, you need to be able to understand those mechanisms in order for you to understand this unit. Okay, all the best.